So this video is part two of the descriptions around serving and service. This one might be, I guess, a little more traditionally about the idea of service. And I'll admit that this video comes somewhat from my own experience. Before I got to lead spiritual communities, before I got to study and do that, I was a social worker. I worked in a nonprofit in Los Angeles. I served the homeless population. And so some of kind of the axe to grind I have with the way a lot of people serve will come out of my experiences there and the ways I've thought and grown since. So let me just talk about, I think, what a really important process is for attempting to serve in the world. In the last video, we talked about just how important it is to have a good habit of service, to have a good habit and a good heart and a place to be able to serve other people. So on the more practical side, let me talk about kind of the process that I think we should be doing as individuals and as a community, how we're starting. So there's kind of two different types of service, of approaching a societal problem or an individual problem. The first one is what's often called a mercy ministry. And what that comes from is that's something like a hurricane comes through, someone's house burns down. There's a very immediate need. They need food, they need shelter, they need to make sure that they are feeling safe, that the situation will not continue happening to them. And those things are so important. But the problem with that is those are kind of rare occurrences. Not many of us will experience those situations on a regular basis, hopefully. But that's kind of how most service is approached. We look at basic needs. We say, okay, do they have enough food? Do they have enough do they have shelter? Do they have sources? And there are elements in society where those things don't exist. They don't. They are not available. And so, yes, we should be helping people in the immediate need. But the problem is, a lot of the time, when we continue to treat a long-term problem as a mercy thing, as an immediate emergency problem, we tend to make people dependent on that type of outside aid. We tend to tear down their dignity because over time people feel like they're not capable of providing for themselves. They're not capable of fixing things themselves. And I think it also can create kind of a nasty disparity in a relationship, because relationships at the end of the day are meant to be mutual. I give to you, you give to me. There's this just interchange because we know one another, we enjoy one another, we help one another out as needed. And the problem with treating many of the ways we approach people as projects, as problems to be solved, is that we are not having an actual relationship with them. We are not treating them with the dignity that I think God desires for them. And we are often taking away their ability for the long term to provide for themselves, to learn the work skills and that sort of thing. And this is, I think, pretty general knowledge at this point. I think people recognize that this is a problem in how a lot of social work has been done. And so as an individual, yes, there are times when you'll see a need, you can donate something, you can jump in, give a little time, and it will make it better. But the vast majority of the time, people need to have a mutual relationship. You can't actually serve them unless you are willing to be served back. And this can feel a little strange, especially when these are people who are radically different than you, when they are people who are socioeconomically very different than you. And so, yes, there has to be a long period of building trust, and that usually starts with listening, especially if you think you see a need. We need to have the habit of showing up and listening well, earning the trust so people can tell us what the actual need is, so we can earn the trust to know them well enough to help draw that out of them, because we do want to serve people well. We want to take care of them because they're worth taking care of. But as always, it's always a mutual thing. We cannot go into a situation assuming I will serve you all the time. I'm the giver, you are the receiver. We always have to be willing, even if it's not money, even if it's not time. Any time we are going in and spending time with someone in a relationship and serving them, we need to recognize that they will also be able to serve us. We will get some benefit out of it, aside from just feeling good. And I think deeply knowing any human being, especially a human being whose life situation is very different than yours, they have things to teach you. And from the spiritual perspective, they likely know things about God that you don't. And so we need to approach that humbly, saying, yeah, I can give you some time or some money right now, but you are my brother or sister. I want to know what you have to give me as well. I also think we need to be very aware of what are our kind of individual areas of influence and responsibility. And depending on who you are, where you are in life, the first thing that might come into your head is like, yeah, I don't have any real influence. I don't have any real responsibility. Maybe I'm unemployed right now. Maybe I stay at home with my kids all the time. Maybe I work a desk job. Maybe I'm a student. There's so many voices that are telling us we don't have influence. We can't fix this. We can't solve this. But there are always places of influence. There are always people that we know how to connect to and get along with that many others won't. There are always little ways we can connect with others. We can make the world a bit better of a place. And this takes a lot of listening, as I said, a lot of paying attention. This takes a lot of seeing the world with God's eyes. And so these two videos on service, I think it has a lot to do with our heart, because the way we live that out, there's a lot of leeway there. We should all, I think, be seeing the needs in the world. And one, we should all probably be feeling overwhelmed, saying, I am not up to that. So the question is, what can I do? What small things, what people do I know, and make sure that they are well taken care of? What little things can I be doing? Because what we're trying to do is build the habit of thankfulness and recognizing that all things come from God, but also the habit of looking for little ways to serve. We do not want to be people who occasionally volunteer. We do not want to be people who serve from convenience. We want to be people who deeply know how loved we are, and we show other people in the world how much God loves them. It may be something absolutely tiny. It may be something gigantic and utterly beyond you. It may be taking on some major social evil that no one knew how to solve until God asked you to do it. So I would encourage you to just be looking at your own habits and looking at your own heart and saying, okay, am I serving on a regular basis? Because if there is not an outward focus to taking care of other people, the rest of these spiritual practices, they can turn inward. They become ingrown. They can become gross. They can become all about you. And that was never the intention. The goal of all these practices is to give you the depth of understanding of who God is, that you can pass that along, that you can pass that blessing on in whatever form it looks like: time, money, energy, expertise, etc. When you know who you are, you can tell people and serve people who they are in God's eyes much better. If you need help thinking this through, if you need help just brainstorming, again, there's a community. Well, let's figure this thing out together, because there's no amount of need out there in the world, and we are asked to take responsibility for that in our own small and broken ways.